You're listening to All Kinds of Catholic with me, Teresa Alessandro. My conversations with different Catholics will give you glimpses into some of the ways we're living our faith today. Pope Leo, quoting St. Augustine, reminds us, "Let us live well, and the times will be good. We are the times." I hope you'll feel encouraged and affirmed, and sometimes challenged, as I am in these conversations. Join our podcast community, get news and background information about the conversations, and share your thoughts if you want to. You can get the newsletter and each episode straight to your inbox by going to allkindsofcatholic.substack.com and clicking on subscribe. It's free. That web address is in the episode notes too, and I'd love you to draw closer to our community. Thank you.
Listeners, thank you for joining the episode today. This is a really interesting episode. We're going to use our guest's full name today. I'm here with Jo Szydlecka of Independent Catholic News, which we'll talk about in due course. But first, welcome, Jo.
Thank you.
You're joining me here in your home in Westminster. Let's start at the beginning, Jo, shall we? Your name, it sounds to me like a Polish name. Have you always been a Catholic? Were you born into a Polish family? Were you born in Poland or were you born here?
My parents, I'm a mixture. My father was Polish and my mother was English and Irish, and they were both Catholic. My mum was a convert and Dad was a Polish Catholic. They met during the war. Dad came over. He was one of those pilots that came to England during the war, fought in the Battle of Britain. I think his main claim to fame during the war was he designed a lot of air crew were bailing out over the sea, and they weren't injured, but they were found dead in the water because they were so cold. They died of exposure, and he designed a special heated flying suit or an insulated flying suit, the idea that they still use today, and he designed it, so I like to think he saved a few lives.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
How wonderful.
Yeah, so that was my parents. Yes, so I grew up Catholic, and I was born in Argentina.
Oh, okay. So not in Poland or here. That was me getting ahead of myself.
Well, after the war, there wasn't much work for pilots. And so my parents were very adventurous and got on a boat and went to Argentina.
Wow. And can you remember anything of Argentina?
No, I left when I was 3, but I have discovered where I was baptized in Cordoba. I found a church where I was baptized. So one day I'd like to go and visit it.
I bet.
Especially since we had Pope Francis was Argentinian.
Of course.
I was born there. My sister Barbara was born there. And then we went to Canada. So I grew up in Canada, really.
Okay. And is your faith something that has stayed with you? Have you been a practicing Catholic all your life, or have there been some wobbles?
I think I've always had a strong faith, but I stopped going to church when I was about 18.
Okay.
It just didn't mean very much to me. I had lost the plot a bit there. My parents were very conservative. They would travel miles to attend a Latin Mass. They were following the Latin Mass Society, and they were very, very, very conservative, whereas I was running around. I joined Greenpeace and CND, and also then I decided I was a Buddhist. So I used to do Buddhist meditation. I went to Japan. I lived in Japan for a bit, and I learned a bit about meditation there.
You're a well-travelled person, Jo. And then I know that you've had a long career in journalism. Tell us a bit about, and during that time, were you a person of faith, or was that still not something you had come back to?
I didn't start off as a journalist. I started off as a teacher. I went to St Mary's before it was a university, and I trained to be a teacher, did English literature, and then I travelled quite a bit doing that. I taught quite a bit. I should say, I never told my parents that I wasn't going to church. Whenever I went home, I would always go to Mass with them. I didn't want to hurt their feelings, but I privately thought that they were very misguided indeed. Didn't understand what they were doing.
And what do you think now? Have you mellowed a bit now?
No, well, it completely changed. I taught for a few years. I worked for the BBC in their education department doing school programmes. Just in the background, I was doing statistical stuff, and I did a bit of work for the World Service. And I started writing about refugees. I got very interested in the plight of the refugees in the Western Sahara, so I got involved in that campaign. And I kept meeting people who were working in these areas that had a faith. So when I was in Thailand, I met the Redemptorist sister and the Good Shepherd sisters. They were working with street children. In Africa, I met people working with street children, and they were people with a faith. They were motivated by something more than just altruism, I think.
Okay.
And that really impressed me. I was also impressed by the Buddhist ones who were doing it. I remember seeing Buddhist monks on a train in Bangkok with a group of Down syndrome children, and they were so lovely. It really affected me. I'm sure that we're going to find lots of people in heaven who aren't Christian.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, I agree with you. While you were noticing those people with faith who were doing work that touched your heart, service, did that seem like a different way of looking at faith than what you had grown up with?
Yes, very much so.
So you began to think about it a bit differently.
My parents were always very generous. I mean, when we lived in Canada, we gave up our bedrooms in the house because some refugees came. They came and stayed with us in our family. My parents were very generous, but I suppose I hadn't noticed, really.
Right.
Yeah, no, they were very generous. They were always bringing people home.
I think sometimes when it's your own family, you sort of take for granted what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, you don't kind of generalise it to what we might do as Christians.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I hadn't. But I started going to church. First of all, I became a journalist. I went to the London College of Printing and I did a journalism course in 1988. Then I started working on local papers. And on local papers, again, I kept finding myself, I was writing about homelessness. I was writing about all these social issues and also meeting the local church people who were very, very good, the local parish. And Mother Teresa came to our parish,
Wow.
the parish in Kentish Town, and I sat at the back and watched her. I think that had an effect.
Right.
I think it was 1996. I thought, this is ridiculous, I've got to do something. So I went and knocked on the door of a local parish, and I think Holy Saturday or something, and he was so busy, so he said, can you come on the Monday? So I went on the Monday. Had a very long chat. And then I just got rolled in. He gave me the times of the masses and told me when we were going to, there was a pilgrimage coming up. I sat at the back quietly for a few weeks, but very quickly I got roped into meeting everybody on the pilgrimage to Lourdes and then joining the choir and then working on the homeless project. Those people I got to know in 1996, I know now, and they've become friends, and I've got to know a lot more.
Okay, so there were a few years where you said you never lost your faith. There was some sort of faith there, but suddenly you just...
I believed in God and I believed in loving my fellow people, but I didn't connect it with Jesus.
But then when you made that connection, it was quite quick.
Yeah.
That you were straight back in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it didn't take very long. I had been tiptoeing on the edge, probably since about 1990. I was dipping my toes in. But then, yes, 96, that was the year I came back really properly.
Sometimes I think, it's an advantage if you have had some seeds planted in childhood when you come back to the faith. It's slightly different from someone coming to the Catholic faith as an adult for the first time. They don't have that background that they can step into quite as easily.
Very much so. I mean, I already knew all my prayers. Mostly I didn't go to Catholic school, but I went to a couple of Catholic schools, and I can say my prayers in English and in Polish. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, I knew about the Rosary.
And I think along the way when you were travelling and working and you were mentioning projects that the Redemptorists were doing. Yes. Obviously, you had some context for that because of your...
I knew what they were doing.
So, you were able to sort of make that sense of all of that.
And I was so impressed. I remember, there was the priests in Thailand. I remember seeing them sitting drinking beer. I thought, I didn't know priests drank beer. And they looked like normal people. They weren't sort of stiff and authoritarian at all. They were very relaxed, doing fantastic work.
Now, it's interesting to me that you're so well-travelled, because I was going to talk about, when we get to Independent Catholic News, which I think we should talk about now, I was going to talk about how, obviously, you have stories on there that are showing us the universal church, the church all over the world. And I was wondering what impact that might have on you, but I guess it's the other way around. You already have been in lots of different places and experienced faith in different places.
I can always learn a lot more.
Maybe we talk about Independent Catholic News then. So, for listeners who don't know, Independent Catholic News is a fantastic resource for us Catholics. I'll put a link in the episode notes and you can catch up if you've not already been familiar with it. So there's news pieces every day from the church around the world. So tell us, where did the idea come from to start Independent Catholic News, and when was that?
I'd worked for most of the Catholic papers as freelance. I worked for the Tablet and I worked for the Herald and I worked for the Universe. Little bits doing freelance and selling them articles and so forth. And then I was invited by the Bishops' Conference to be a consultant. They just wanted me there for a couple of months to advise. In fact, I was there much longer because that was the year that Pope John Paul II died. I'd been sent to Rome to the English College to set up an office there, and then he died, and so everybody came. The Archbishop of Canterbury came, the Cardinal came, and it was a massive event. And then I ended up working for them much longer. And finally, I wrote a report, my advice on what I thought. And one of the things I said was, why don't you do a news website? Because the Australian Bishops' Conference had one at the time. And the American Bishops' Conference, they were sort of sharing it with a couple of others, but they were putting out news every day. Because there's so much going on. Let's tell people what's happening. And my ambition is always to get stories not just in the Catholic press, but in the mainstream press, out in the world, not just in the Catholic press. So I put this in my report. Nothing happened. So I decided to do it myself.
Well, that is women in the church in a nutshell.
So I decided to, and a friend helped me. And one of my neighbours was a web designer, so she helped design the first prototype version of it.
So you, from nothing, you
Yes.
started a daily news.
No, it wasn't daily. To begin with, it was twice a week.
Okay.
But I was putting out a saint every day and a spiritual reflection. I think, different people do a Sunday reflection for me. Then it went up to every day because there's so much news. There's so much happening. Sometimes I hear things and I just leap out of bed in the middle of the night and put them on because there's so much happening.
I think once you're looking at the whole world, the Catholic Church around the world.
Well, it's mostly the English-speaking world, but nevertheless,
Right.
certainly the Pope gets everywhere.
How many years has Independent Catholic News been working now?
Well, it started in 2000, so it's a long time.
Are you the backbone all these years, Jo, of
Yeah.
Independent Catholic News? You coordinate everything.
I've got a very good technical support. It's much more user-friendly and much safer and easier to use now too. And I can update it from my phone, wherever I am, which is really good.
Now, I find doing a conversation every week for all kinds of Catholic, I've done just over 100 now, and I've learned so much from all those conversations,
bet.
things that I didn't know. And I'm guessing it's even more so for you that maybe you've learned a lot about the church.
Oh, absolutely, all the time.
And you feel you're still learning?
All the time. I know nothing. Every day I'm learning more.
And are there some stories that have stayed with you? Things that you'd immediately think, well, I'm glad we covered that, or that was really difficult?
There's hundreds of stories. I like the human interest ones particularly. People who are heroic in the back, who don't get any publicity. The people who are working very hard. And there was a woman, a nun in Thailand, I remember, who was working with the street children, who I've written about quite a bit. What about the priest in the Church of the Holy Family in Gaza?
Yes.
The quiet behind the scenes, all the medical people.
Certainly, these last couple of years, I've seen that the plight of Palestinian Christians has got quite a lot of coverage on Independent Catholic News, which I'm grateful for. When I look at your work, I see a lot of people in the place telling us about their experience.
Yes,
I can see that's important to you.
Yeah, very much so, yes.
How have you built those relationships with Palestinian Christians then?
Through the years, I think more and more people have got in touch with me, and I've kept in touch with them. I try to pay people who, if they write sort of regularly, might manage to pay the rock bottom NUJ rate, but I try to make sure people get paid for that sort of thing.
They might be struggling to make a livelihood.
They
in
are,
other ways at the moment.
Absolutely. There's so many good people out there. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Every morning I look at your update on Independent Catholic News.
I'd recommend that to listeners to sign up for that because it just keeps me up to date with what's happening around the world in the church. There's plenty of news from England and Wales. I just feel informed. And it's always amazing to me that I can have all that information at my fingertips for no cost. Speaking of heroic, you've put in many years of service to provide this.
Well, I don't want to charge people because it doesn't cost very much to put something on a website. That's the great thing about the internet. Actually building a website doesn't, you have to pay the technicians and things to do it, but actually typing something up isn't so arduous.
But it's your time though, isn't it?
It's my time, yeah. Yeah, well, I want to reach as many people as possible.
And I'm guessing it's not Monday to Friday 9 to 5.
No.
Because current affairs never is it?
No, it's 7 days a week.
And of course, if news is coming from other parts of the world, it's not necessarily our daytime either, is it?
No, I like to be invisible, actually. I like to be an invisible reporter. Even when I have done television programs and things, I've never put myself in front. I've always tried to get people to do the talking, which is what you're doing in your job.
I try to, yes. I feel like, well, I'm going to ask the questions that I think listeners might want to know.
Of course.
But I really want the guests to have the opportunity to talk about how they're experiencing their faith. For you, you want people to be able to tell their story, don't you?
Absolutely.
Listeners, this is the point where Jo's birdsong clock went off. And after that, we began to talk about the parish that she lives right next door to.
Very lively community there. It's a beautiful church. Have a garden. Just the building is beautiful. They have the more serious masses, which are all in Latin, and they're beautiful. But I like the family mass best. And you go in and there's dogs and children, and the children go out at the beginning of the mass, and then they come back in with all the pictures they've drawn, and they all always sing something, and they get a little blessing. And I really like that mass best.
So for you, it sounds like a bit of life and energy.
Definitely.
Coming from the community, not so much quiet reflection. For some people, I think that feeling that you're part of a community that has got that life and energy going on and generations together is really important.
I really like that. I do like quietness as well. I go to St. Bino's and the silent retreat. I like to have some silence. I can always go for a walk. There's lots of quiet places around here. And I grow lots of things. I've got some things I'm growing at the front and the back. I like feeding the fox and feeding the birds. I like quiet times as well.
Well, I'm guessing that's important if you are having to be available for people bringing you stories so much. To be able to just switch off for a bit must help.
Got to switch off. Yeah, you have to, I think, for your mental health.
But I'm thinking that you're somebody, it's reminding me of people that have been on the podcast who are, for example, nurses who work shifts. And they say, some of my guests have said, they can't get into a routine. Their life just doesn't settle into a routine because the shifts vary. And I'm guessing that your life's a bit like that. You maybe have to take those chances to have some quiet where you can.
The routine is that I have to get the site done before 2:00 in the morning because that's when it goes out.
Right.
So I have to get that done. And other routines like animals need to be fed, plants need to be watered. I need to eat. I'm a bit of a health nut, so I quite like to get exercise. I like swimming and I like walking. I've done lots of long walks.
Does that include pilgrimages?
I've done the Ignatian Camino several times now with the Jesuits from Farm Street.
So tell us about the Ignatian Camino. Where is that route?
You follow the footsteps of St. Ignatius. It's across northern Spain. The highlight of it really is Verdú is beautiful, and then you walk through these forests and mountains, and Montserrat, the monastery on a high mountain. And on the way, it's quite exciting because there's wild boars and things, and it can be quite, you feel it could be medieval. And then you end up in Barcelona, the beautiful Sagrada Familia. That's a wonderful journey. It takes about 10 days. It's wonderful. And also from Farmer Street, we've done other walks. We've walked from almost London to Canterbury, more or less, I think. And then we've done Norwich to Walsingham.
You've given us the flavour already then. So some of the things that are important to you, quiet reflection. And I'm reminded of you finding Buddhism and meditation quite helpful for a while. There's a kind of resonance there, isn't there?
Definitely, yes.
And walking in the countryside too can be very reflective, can't it? But at the same time, you're doing that on pilgrimage, so there's some meaning, but you're with a group and that kind of community is also available.
That's right.
It's very connected, Jo. You're giving us a very connected picture of your life and your faith. Now, I ask guests sometimes about prayers and practices that mean something to them. You've given us some ideas of practices there. What kind of prayer would you go for? Are you someone who just talks to God as you go through the day? Do you have some set prayers?
Well, I do that. I try to do the morning prayer in the morning from the office. And then sometimes I do the pray as you go, especially if I'm feeling tired, because pray as you go, you can close your eyes and listen to the music, and it's a reflection on the day's gospel, and that's lovely. If I have the time, I might pop next door to Mass. Sometimes they have very early morning Mass, but I don't do as much as I should. I always do night prayer. And the rest of the time, I think I probably just chat to God as I go along. Especially when I look at my animals, I always say, thank you, God, for giving me Garfield. Silly things like that. But I pray about when you see somebody walking in the street who looks a bit miserable, sitting on a bus, people you pass, but it's very disorganized.
For listeners, Pray As You Go is another work of the Jesuits, Ignatian Spirituality. I'll put a link to that. I think I have before.
Pray As You Go is wonderful.
It is. And then the office of the church, morning prayer and night prayer is part of that. Talked about that as well on the podcast a little bit. And I was writing something on the Substack one time recently about how I think many Catholics don't know that the office is available, don't know that we can be praying with the whole church all around the world by joining in that cycle of morning and evening prayer. So listeners, here's another person who knows about it and is doing it. You can join in too. Again, I'll put that link into the episode.
I started doing that from the beginning when I started going to church, because the parish I was in, they had morning prayer every morning. That got me into the habit, and I bought my little red book, and now I've got it on my phone. Although I don't like all of the prayers, I find some of the words of the smiting your enemies and things, I'm not very keen on that. Swords and
vengeance,
yes. I'm not very keen on that myself. But some of the prayers are beautiful.
So as we're drawing to the end of the conversation then, Jo, what do you think of the future of Independent Catholic News? What would you like to see happening?
I would love to see it continue and grow. I'm hoping to get a couple of interns to write for it, and I would love another journalist or two to write for it. Personally, I'd love to take a back seat at some point, because I've been doing it for so long. It's growing well. I mean, we had 4.2 million hits last month, so
wow.
It gets a lot of visitors. So I'd like it to continue and grow.
Well, it sounds like there is a need for it. People are enjoying it and finding it helpful and wanting to be connected.
Definitely, yeah. I've, as you said, planted the seeds of it, and I'd love to pass it on at some point. People invite me to go on holiday or something. I think, what do I do? 2 weeks ago, I went to Stockholm with some friends, but because other people who weren't able to help me with it, I was sightseeing, going on the boats, doing all sorts of things, coming back and the hotel, going to bed, and I was in bed writing it up, doing the website.
It makes it hard to take a proper break.
Yes, it does make it hard to take a proper break. I've updated the site from Egypt, from Canada, from Spain, from Italy.
Okay. If there's anyone listening who has a bit of Catholic news, would you like them to send it to you?
Oh, I'm always looking for news, constantly, yes. Because one thing that worries me is, because I live in London, it's a bit London-centric.
Okay.
So London news. I'd love to hear what's happening around the country. I get a lot of news from schools in Liverpool, but I don't hear much from schools in other parts of the country. So I'd love to hear more, and I'd love to hear more from young people, especially all the youth activities, what people are doing. And there is a listings page for forthcoming events. Even if it's not a big story, if you've got an event coming up, tell me, I can put it in the listings. And there's no limit to the size of the listings. I try and do about 8 stories a day, news stories.
Right.
For listeners,
join that big group of people who are already following Independent Catholic News, and the link will be in the episode notes. So just to finish then, Jo, thank you so much for spending some time and making me a cup of tea. And we're sitting here with your cat Garfield and talking about your life and your work. It's been really interesting. I think you're somebody who's travelled and brought all of your experience to what you do for Independent Catholic News. I often talk about the service of Catholic people. This is a great service for the Church that you've been providing for all those years. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And just to finish, Jo mentioned her favourite part of the office is the Canticle of Daniel. Oh, all you works of the Lord, oh, bless the Lord. To him be highest glory and praise forever. And you, angels of the Lord, oh, bless the Lord. To him be highest glory and praise forever. Thanks so much for joining me on All Kinds of Catholic this time. I hope today's conversation has resonated with you. A new episode is released each Wednesday, and you can follow All Kinds of Catholic on the usual podcast platforms. Rate and review to help others find it. You can also follow us on social media at Kinds of Catholic. And remember, if you connect with us on Substack, you can comment on episodes and share your thoughts and be part of the dialogue there. Until the next time.